Admiral Vexthor stood before the massive holographic display showing Earth's solar system. His three eyes studied the small blue planet that floated in the void like a tiny marble. The intelligence report spread across his command table told a simple story. Humans were primitive creatures who had barely learned to leave their homeworld. Their technology was weak and their military forces were scattered across different nations that fought each other more than they worked together. The Zephyrian collective had conquered 17 star systems using the same approach every time. Send a massive fleet to overwhelm the target planet's defenses within hours. Most species surrendered immediately when they saw the size of the armada approaching their world. The few that tried to fight were crushed so quickly that their resistance lasted less than a day. Vexthor's tactical computer showed him the numbers. 500 warships equipped with plasma cannons that could melt through any known metal, shield generators that could absorb the energy of a star, troop transports carrying 2 million soldiers trained since birth for planetary conquest. Against this force, Earth's primitive rockets and crude weapons seemed like toys in the hands of children. The Admiral touched a control panel and the hologram zoomed in on Earth itself. Green continents and blue oceans swirled beneath white clouds. The planet looked peaceful and undefended. Orbital scans showed some artificial satellites, but nothing that resembled serious military hardware. The humans appeared to use their space technology, mainly for communication and weather monitoring. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the deep space monitoring station orbiting Jupiter and watched the sensor readings with growing concern. Strange energy signatures were moving through the outer solar system in formation patterns that looked too organized to be natural. The readings showed massive objects moving at speeds that defied conventional physics. Whatever was out there was big, and it was heading directly toward Earth. Jake activated the emergency communication channel that connected all Earth's defense installations. His voice carried across the solar system to listening posts on Mars, the Moon, and dozens of space stations. The message was simple but terrifying. Unknown objects approaching from deep space. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. All units prepare for possible hostile contact. Dr. Lisa Carter received Jake's transmission in her laboratory beneath the Colorado mountains. As Earth's leading expert on alien life, she had always believed that first contact with another species would be peaceful. Scientists meeting scientists to share knowledge and explore the universe together. The sensor data on her screen suggested something very different. These objects were moving in attack formation, and they were armed with energy weapons of incredible power. Lisa's fingers moved quickly across her computer keyboard as she analyzed the data. The alien ships were using some kind of faster-than-light propulsion that human science barely understood. Their energy signatures indicated power sources that could fuel entire cities. Most disturbing of all, there were hundreds of them, and they showed no signs of attempting peaceful communication. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the lead Zephyrian warship, Admiral Vexthor reviewed the final preparations for conquest. His species had perfected the art of planetary subjugation over thousands of years. The key was speed and overwhelming force. Hit the target so hard and so fast that resistance became impossible. Break their military forces and destroy their government in the first few hours. After that, most species accepted their new reality and submitted to Zephyrian rule. The Admiral's aide approached with a datapad containing the final intelligence assessment. Earth's military forces were divided among nearly 200 separate nations. Their most powerful weapons were crude nuclear devices that could barely damage a single Zephyrian ship. Their space-based defenses consisted of primitive satellites with no offensive capability. The conquest should be completed in less than 6 Earth hours. Vexthor smiled with satisfaction as he gave the order to begin the attack. The massive armada moved into Earth's solar system like a pack of predators closing in on helpless prey. Psychological warfare broadcasts began transmitting on all human communication frequencies. The message was standard for all Zephyrian conquests. Surrender immediately, and your species will be allowed to live as workers in the collective. Resist and face complete extinction. President Claire Davis stood in the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council as reports flooded in from around the world. Radio telescopes in Australia detected the alien fleet first. Deep space monitors in Chile confirmed the approaching ships. Radar installations in Russia tracked objects larger than aircraft carriers moving through space at impossible speeds. The evidence was undeniable. Earth was under attack by beings from another world. The president looked around the room at the faces of world leaders who had spent years arguing about trade disputes and territorial boundaries. All of those petty conflicts seemed meaningless now. Humanity faced an enemy that wanted to enslave or destroy every person on the planet. Political differences became irrelevant when the survival of the I species was at stake. Claire activated the global communication system that would broadcast her words to every nation on Earth. Her message would be heard in every language and carried to every corner of the world. The words she spoke would define humanity's response to the greatest threat it had ever faced. The aliens expected fear and surrender. Instead, they were about to discover what humans became when their backs were against the wall. The Zephyrian fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Vexthor watched with satisfaction as his ships took up attack formation. The plan was simple and had never failed. Destroy Earth's orbital installations first to eliminate any possible resistance from space. Next, target major population centers to break human morale. Finally, land troops to secure key military installations and government buildings. But something was wrong with the tactical display. Earth's orbital installations were not the primitive communication satellites that intelligence had reported. They were massive structures bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields. As the Admiral watched in growing alarm, these installations began powering up weapon systems that registered energy levels, comparable to Zephyrian military technology. The first shots of the war came, not from the attacking alien fleet but from Earth's defensive positions. Beams of concentrated energy lanced out from the orbital platforms and struck the lead Zephyrian ships with devastating effect. The aliens' shields held, but the power of the human weapons was far greater than expected. This was not going to be the quick and easy conquest that Vexthor had planned. On Earth below, billions of humans watched the first space battle in their planet's history unfold on television screens and computer monitors. They saw their defensive installations trading fire with alien warships in the void above their heads. The fight for the survival of human civilization had begun, and the outcome would determine whether their species lived free or died as slaves to creatures from the stars. Captain Ryan Blake gripped the command chair of Defense Platform Sentinel-7 as another wave of alien plasma fire struck their shields. The energy barriers flickered but held firm against the assault. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their stations while alarms blared throughout the massive orbital fortress. This was supposed to be a routine patrol mission, but it had turned into the fight of their lives. The Zephyrian advance guard had expected to sweep through Earth's outer defenses like a knife through paper. Instead, they found themselves locked in a brutal firefight with installations that refused to die. Every time they thought they had destroyed a human platform, it would regenerate its shields and return fire with weapons that punched holes in alien armor plating. Ryan watched his tactical display as 3 more Zephyrian ships approached from the port side. Their hulls gleamed with an alien metal that reflected the light of distant stars. These vessels were larger than anything humans had ever built, and they bristled with weapon systems designed to crack planets in half. But size and firepower meant nothing if you could not hit your target. The human captain gave the order to activate the adaptive targeting system. This was technology that Earth's scientists had developed in secret over the past decade. It learned from each exchange of fire and adjusted defensive strategies in real time. The aliens fought with rigid tactical doctrine that had worked against 17 other civilizations. Humans fought like cornered animals with nothing left to lose. Sentinel-7's main cannon fired a concentrated beam of superheated plasma that carved through the lead Zephyrian ship's shields and melted a hole in its hull. The alien vessel spun out of control and crashed into one of its companion ships. Both craft exploded in brilliant fireballs that lit up the darkness of space. Ryan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before turning to face the next wave of attackers. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked frantically in the underground command bunker beneath Colorado as reports flooded in from defense platforms across the solar system. Her job was to analyze alien communications and figure out what the enemy was planning. What she discovered in the intercepted transmissions made her blood run cold with terror and rage. The Zephyrians were not just conquering planets for territory or resources. They were harvesting entire populations for slave labor in their industrial complexes. Billions of intelligent beings from 17 different worlds now worked in alien factories, under conditions that made death seem like mercy. This was not warfare in any civilized sense. This was genocide with extra steps designed to extract maximum profit from the victims. Elena's translation programs decoded more disturbing details from the alien communications. The Zephyrians planned to strip mine Earth's crust for rare metals while converting the atmosphere to support their own biology. Every human city would be demolished and replaced with alien colonies. The oceans would be drained and the continents reshaped to match Zephyrian preferences. Nothing of human civilization would remain. The doctor activated the emergency broadcast system and transmitted her findings to every military command center on Earth. The message was simple but devastating. The aliens did not want to rule humanity. They wanted to erase it completely and replace it with something alien. There could be no surrender and no negotiation. This was a fight for the right to exist. Commander Zektar stood on the bridge of his battleship and watched human resistance with growing confusion. Every species the Zephyrians had encountered either surrendered immediately or fought according to predictable military patterns. They protected their civilians while their armies fought conventional battles using established tactics. Defeat was accepted gracefully when it became inevitable. Humans violated every rule of civilized warfare. They used kamikaze attacks that sacrificed entire crews to damage single enemy ships. Their tactics changed constantly in ways that made no logical sense. Worst of all, they fought as if defeat meant the extinction of their entire species. There was a desperation in their resistance that Zektar had never seen before. The commander opened a communication channel to Admiral Vexthor and delivered his report. Human military doctrine was completely unlike anything in Zephyrian databases. They showed no regard for conventional strategy or acceptable losses. Every human soldier fought as if the survival of their families depended on killing as many aliens as possible before dying. This was not war as the Zephyrians understood. Colonel Amy Patterson led her strike team through the wreckage of a crashed Zephyrian scout ship in the desert. Outside Las Vegas, the alien vessel had been brought down by surface-to-air missiles, but most of its computer systems were still intact. Intelligence gathered from this ship could provide crucial information about enemy capabilities and intentions. Amy's team moved carefully through the twisted metal corridors of the alien craft. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on walls covered with symbols that hurt human eyes to look at directly. The air inside the ship smelled of ozone and something else that reminded the colonel of rotting flowers. Everything about this place felt wrong and hostile to human senses. They found the main computer core in what appeared to be the ship's command center. 3 dead aliens slumped over control panels with their strange, elongated bodies twisted at impossible angles. Their skin was pale green and covered with scales that shifted color even in death. These were the beings that wanted to enslave humanity and strip their world bare. Amy's technical specialist connected a portable computer to the alien system and began downloading files. The data that emerged painted a picture of conquest that made the colonel's hands shake with rage. Detailed plans for processing human prisoners into work units, blueprints for factories that would turn Earth's resources into Zephyrian weapons, population projections that treated humans like cattle to be managed and exploited. But the most disturbing discovery was a series of recordings from other conquered worlds. The colonel watched in horror as peaceful civilizations were systematically destroyed by the same aliens now attacking Earth. Cities burned, while families were separated and shipped to different planets. Children torn from their parents and programmed to serve their new masters. Entire cultures wiped out as if they had never existed. Amy transmitted the recordings to military headquarters with a Priority 1 classification. Every human on Earth needed to see these images and understand what defeat would mean. The aliens were not coming to conquer territory or demand tribute. They were coming to erase humanity from existence and replace it with profitable slavery. The colonel looked around at her team as they finished gathering intelligence from the crashed ship. These men and women had volunteered for a dangerous mission behind enemy lines. Now they understood that this was not just another military operation. This was a fight for the right of their species to continue existing in any form whatsoever. Meanwhile, in space above Earth, the battle for humanity's orbital defenses continued with increasing intensity. Both sides had suffered heavy losses, but neither was willing to retreat. The Zephyrians threw more ships into the attack, while human platforms fought back with desperate courage. The outcome of this engagement would determine whether Earth's children grew up free or never grew up at all. The recordings from the crashed alien ship spread across Earth like wildfire through every television network and internet connection on the planet. In living rooms and offices around the world, humans watched footage of peaceful alien civilizations being systematically destroyed by the same creatures now attacking their home. Children cried as they saw alien families torn apart and sent to different slave camps. Adults sat in stunned silence as entire worlds were stripped bare of life and converted into industrial wastelands. Something unprecedented happened in the hours after those recordings went public. Every nation on Earth put aside centuries of conflict and rivalry. The United States called off its disputes with Russia and China. Israel and Palestine declared a temporary truce. India and Pakistan opened their borders to share military resources. For the first time in human history, the entire species united with a single purpose. They would fight or they would die, but they would never surrender. Major Ben Tucker led his strike team through the wreckage of another crashed Zephyrian command ship in the mountains of Switzerland. This vessel had been brought down by a coordinated missile attack from 3 different European air forces working together. The fact that nations who had been enemies just days ago were now sharing targeting data showed how completely the alien threat had changed human priorities. Ben's team moved carefully through the alien ship's corridors while emergency lights flickered overhead. The crash had killed most of the crew, but the ship's computer systems were still partially functional. What they found in the databanks made even hardened soldiers sick with rage and determination. The aliens kept detailed records of every atrocity they had committed across 17 star systems. The recordings showed children from a dozen different worlds being separated from their parents and trained as slave workers. Elderly beings were simply executed because they had no economic value. Pregnant females were kept in breeding facilities to produce more workers for Zephyrian industries. The aliens treated intelligent lifeforms like livestock to be managed for maximum profit. Ben transmitted the new recordings back to Earth Command with a message that spread to every military unit on the planet. The enemy was not just another military force to be defeated. They were monsters who had turned genocide into a profitable business model. There could be no quarter given and no mercy shown to creatures who had committed crimes beyond human imagination. Back on Earth, something was happening that no Zephyrian intelligence analyst had predicted. Human civilians were not hiding in shelters waiting for their military to protect them. Instead, they were transforming their entire society into a war machine. Factories that had produced cars began making tanks and missiles. Computer companies switched to building guidance systems for weapons. Even children were learning to manufacture explosives and ammunition in school workshops. General Karen White stood in the Pentagon War Room and watched as reports came in from around the world. Brazil had converted its entire steel industry to weapons production. Japan was building warships at a rate that defied belief. Germany was producing so many military vehicles that they were running out of metal to build them with. The transformation of human industry was happening faster than any computer model had predicted possible. The General activated Protocol Omega, a plan that had been developed in secret over the past decade. Every major industrial facility on Earth received orders to abandon civilian production and focus entirely on military needs. Space elevators designed for moving cargo were converted into massive railguns that could launch projectiles at speeds approaching light itself. Orbital factories began producing weapons instead of communication satellites. Dr. Peter Yang worked around the clock in his laboratory studying captured Zephyrian technology. What he discovered was both encouraging and disturbing. The alien weapons were designed for quick and clean conquests against civilized opponents. They were not built for extended warfare against an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for victory. In several key areas, human engineering was actually superior to Zephyrian designs. The aliens had become complacent after conquering 17 civilizations without serious resistance. Their technology focused on overwhelming firepower rather than efficiency or adaptability. Human weapons were designed by engineers who assumed they would face determined opponents, willing to fight to the death. This difference in design philosophy was about to become crucial in the coming battles. Peter made breakthrough discoveries in reverse engineering alien shield generators and propulsion systems. But his most important finding was a weakness in Zephyrian armor plating. The metal they used was incredibly strong against directed energy weapons, but it became brittle when exposed to certain electromagnetic frequencies. Human scientists began developing weapons specifically designed to exploit this vulnerability, the Zephyrian main fleet, was still 3 days away from Earth, but Admiral Vexthor was already receiving disturbing reports from his advanced forces. Human resistance was not weakening as expected. Instead, it was growing stronger and more coordinated with each passing hour. The primitives were adapting their tactics faster than Zephyrian computers could predict their next moves. Vexthor studied intelligence reports that made no sense according to established conquest doctrine. Human military forces were not trying to protect their civilian population centers. Instead, they were evacuating cities and converting them into fortress complexes designed to maximize enemy casualties. Every major population center was becoming a death trap for invading forces. Even more disturbing were reports of human behavior that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Civilian transport ships were being converted into suicide vessels packed with explosives. Children were being trained to use weapons and build bombs. Elderly humans were volunteering for missions that guaranteed their deaths if it meant killing a few alien soldiers. This was not warfare as the Zephyrians understood it. Commander Zektar transmitted another report to his admiral, describing human tactics that seemed to come from the mind of a madman. Human forces would retreat from positions only to return hours later, with completely different weapons and strategies. They showed no regard for acceptable casualty rates or traditional military objectives. Every engagement felt like fighting a cornered predator with nothing left to lose. The commander had studied military history from dozens of conquered civilizations, but he had never encountered anything like human resistance. Other species fought to protect their territory and population. Humans fought as if the survival of their entire species depended on killing every single alien invader. There was something primal and terrifying about their approach to warfare that made seasoned Zephyrian veterans nervous. On Earth below, President Claire Davis addressed a joint session of every world government via satellite link. Her words were broadcast to every human on the planet and translated into every known language. The message was simple, but it would define humanity's approach to the greatest threat they had ever faced. They would not just defend their world. They would make sure that any species foolish enough to attack Earth would never have the chance to threaten anyone ever again. The Zephyrian main fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, expecting to find Earth broken and ready for occupation. Instead, Admiral Vexthor stared at his tactical display in growing horror as sensors revealed what the small blue planet had become in just 1 week. Every moon and asteroid in the solar system now bristled with weapons. Space stations that had been research facilities were now fortress complexes with enough firepower to level continents. Earth itself pulsed with electromagnetic energy that interfered with Zephyrian navigation systems. The Admiral had conquered 17 civilizations, and he had never seen anything like this transformation. Other species built defenses around their most important cities and military bases. Humans had turned their entire star system into a weapon designed to kill anything that approached their homeworld. Even the planet's magnetic field had been modified to create massive electromagnetic pulse waves that could disable starships at incredible distances. Vexthor opened communication channels to his fleet commanders and tried to make sense of the impossible situation. His advance forces reported that human resistance was not weakening despite heavy losses. Instead, it was becoming more vicious and desperate with each battle. The primitives were fighting as if defeat meant the complete extinction of their species, rather than simple conquest and occupation. Captain Nicole Sanders stood on the bridge of the cargo freighter Liberty Bell as it approached the massive Zephyrian flagship at full speed. Her ship was packed with nuclear warheads and conventional explosives in quantities that would have terrified any sane person, but sanity was a luxury that humanity could no longer afford when facing an enemy that wanted to erase them from existence completely. Nicole had volunteered for this suicide mission after seeing recordings of alien atrocities committed on other worlds. The images of children being torn from their families and sent to slave camps had filled her with rage that burned hotter than the nuclear fire she was about to unleash. If her death could cripple the enemy fleet and save even one human life, then the sacrifice was worth making. The Zephyrian flagship's defensive systems opened fire on the approaching freighter, but Nicole's ship was already too close to stop. The Liberty Bell crashed into the alien vessel's command section and exploded with the force of a small star. The flagship broke apart in a chain reaction of secondary explosions that lit up space for millions of kilometers in every Direction Dr. Marcus Johnson worked frantically. In his underground laboratory as reports came in of Zephyrian biological warfare attacks on major cities. The aliens had released a plague designed to target human DNA and kill entire populations within hours. But they had made a critical mistake in assuming that humans would simply die quietly when faced with biological extinction. Marcus and his team had been working on defensive measures against biological weapons for years. Within 24 hours of the first plague outbreak, they had not only developed a cure but had modified it into something far more dangerous. If the aliens wanted to fight with biological weapons, then humans would show them what total biological warfare really meant. The modified virus that Marcus created was specifically designed to target Zephyrian physiology. It spread through their atmospheric systems and attacked their immune systems with devastating efficiency. Within hours of release, entire alien ships became floating tombs filled with the corpses of creatures who thought they could exterminate humanity with disease. Lieutenant Commander Steve Roberts discovered that human experiments with faster-than-light communication could be weaponized in ways that no other species had imagined. Human ships began appearing inside enemy formations without warning, firing point-blank salvos, then vanishing before return fire could be coordinated. The aliens' numerical advantage became meaningless when humans could strike from anywhere at any time. Steve led squadron after squadron of human fighters in attacks that violated every principle of space combat. His pilots would materialize inside enemy ships, detonate their weapons, and teleport away before the explosions could kill them. It was warfare that resembled magic more than military science, and it was driving the Zephyrian fleet to the edge of panic. The most shocking discovery came when Dr. Angela Foster finished decoding the complete Zephyrian historical database, captured from destroyed enemy ships. Every species the aliens had conquered was given the same choice: surrender and live as slaves, or fight and die quickly in hopeless battles. Humans were the first species to choose a third option that had never occurred to the aliens. Angela's translation revealed communications between Zephyrian commanders expressing confusion and growing fear about human tactics. They had expected resistance to collapse once casualty rates reached levels that would break any civilized military force. Instead, humans fought harder and more viciously as their losses mounted. It was behavior that made no sense to creatures who viewed warfare as a business transaction. The aliens were learning too late that humans did not fight to win battles or protect territory. They fought to ensure that their enemy could never threaten them again, regardless of the cost in human lives. This was warfare as total extinction rather than political conquest, and it was something completely outside Zephyrian experience or understanding. Admiral Vexthor watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by tactics that seemed to come from the depths of insanity. Human ships would ram his vessels at full speed rather than retreat when faced with superior firepower. Human soldiers would detonate nuclear weapons at point-blank range rather than allow alien troops to capture strategic positions. Every engagement felt like fighting wild animals backed into a corner. The Admiral opened emergency communications with the Zephyrian homeworld and tried to explain what was happening in the Sol system. His superiors found his reports impossible to believe. How could a primitive species be defeating the most powerful military force in known space? The answer was simple but terrifying. Humans were not primitive. They were something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Captain Ashley Thompson led the first human pursuit fleet as it tracked retreating Zephyrian forces back toward their staging areas. The aliens were running from a battle they should have won easily, but they had encountered something that challenged every assumption about warfare and conquest. They were learning what it meant to fight a species that refused to accept any outcome other than the complete destruction of its enemies. The pursuit fleet followed the aliens through 3-star systems and destroyed every installation they found. Human forces were not content to simply repel the invasion. They wanted to ensure that the creatures who had tried to enslave their species would never have the chance to threaten anyone ever again. This was war as species extinction, and it was redefining what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of predators. Admiral Vexthor sat in his damaged command chair as emergency lights flickered across the bridge of his crippled flagship. Around him, the remnants of what had once been the most powerful invasion fleet in Zephyrian history limped away from Earth's solar system. Half his ships were destroyed, and the survivors were filled with wounded soldiers who spoke in whispers about the horrors they had witnessed in battle. Against the humans, the Admiral activated his long-range communication array and sent a final transmission back to the Zephyrian homeworld. His words would be recorded in the military archives as a warning for future generations. Do not attack the human homeworld. Do not engage their species anywhere in the galaxy. They are not like the others. They do not fight to win battles or capture territory. They fight to ensure their enemy can never threaten them again. Captain Ashley Thompson stood on the bridge of the human pursuit vessel Vengeance as it tracked the fleeing alien ships through deep space. Her orders were clear and had come directly from Earth Command. The creatures who had tried to enslave humanity must not be allowed to escape and regroup for another attack. Every Zephyrian installation within 50 light-years of Earth would be found and destroyed. Ashley's fleet consisted of ships that had been cargo haulers and passenger transports just 2 weeks ago. Now they mounted weapons designed from captured alien technology and powered by human determination that burned brighter than any star. The transformation of humanity's merchant fleet into a war machine had happened faster than anyone thought possible. The Gyao pursuit fleet caught up with the Zephyrian, stragglers near a gas giant in an unnamed star system. The alien ships were trying to reach a refueling station built into one of the planet's moons. Ashley gave the order to attack without offering terms for surrender. Humans had learned from alien records that mercy was a weakness their enemies would exploit. Colonel Derek Lopez led the assault team that boarded the Zephyrian supply station after the brief but vicious battle that left it crippled but intact. What his soldiers found in the station's computer systems changed everything. Humanity thought they knew about the scope of the alien threat. The Zephyrians had not just conquered 17 civilizations. They controlled a network of slave worlds that stretched across thousands of star systems. Derek's technical specialists downloaded terabytes of data that revealed the true horror of Zephyrian expansion. Billions of intelligent beings from hundreds of different species lived in conditions that made death seem like freedom. The aliens had turned conquest into an industrial process that generated enormous profits from the suffering of enslaved populations. The colonel transmitted his findings back to Earth Command along with detailed star charts, showing the location of every slave world in Zephyrian space. President Claire Davis received the data in her underground bunker and made a decision that would define humanity's role in galactic politics for centuries to come. Earth would not be satisfied with simply defeating the invasion. They would liberate every enslaved world regardless of the cost. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked around the clock to process the captured Zephyrian databases and create translation programs for dozens of alien languages. Her computers decoded desperate messages from slave worlds begging for rescue from creatures who had been trapped in alien labor camps for generations. The cries for help came from species that humans had never heard of but who shared the same desire for freedom. Elena's translations revealed that many enslaved civilizations had maintained secret resistance movements despite centuries of oppression. They had been waiting for someone powerful enough to challenge Zephyrian rule, but no such rescuer had ever appeared. Now they were receiving broadcasts from something called Earth that promised liberation for all enslaved peoples. Commander Linda Walsh led the first human diplomatic mission to contact other species in the galaxy, but this was not conquest disguised as diplomacy. Her ships carried medical supplies and engineering equipment, along with weapons designed to break Zephyrian slave camps. The message she brought to enslaved worlds was simple. Humans had defeated the creatures who thought they owned the galaxy. Linda's fleet arrived at the first slave world to find alien overseers fleeing in panic as their former prisoners rose in revolt. The sight of human warships in orbit above their planet gave enslaved beings the courage to fight back against centuries of oppression. Liberation movements that had been crushed for generations suddenly found themselves supported by weapons and troops from Earth. The systematic dismantling of the Zephyrian Empire began with mathematical precision. Human fleets appeared at slave world after slave world and provided the firepower needed to break alien control. But the real work was done by the enslaved peoples themselves as they took revenge against creatures who had treated them like property for centuries. Admiral Vexthor's warning reached the Zephyrian homeworld just as reports began arriving of human attacks on slave installations throughout their territory. The message was clear and terrifying. Humans were not content to defend their own planet. They were systematically destroying everything the Zephyrians had built over thousands of years of conquest. The alien leadership tried to negotiate with human representatives, but received only silence in response. Humans did not want territory or tribute or political agreements. They wanted the complete extinction of any species that had participated in the enslavement of intelligent beings. There could be no peace with creatures who turned genocide into a business model. News of the Zephyrian defeat spread throughout the galaxy faster than light travel. Species that had lived in terror of alien conquest for millennia suddenly learned that the seemingly unstoppable empire had been crushed by creatures from a small blue planet that most had never heard of. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted overnight. Commander Zektar sent the last transmission from the retreating Zephyrian fleet before his ship was destroyed by human pursuit forces. His final words were broadcast across alien communication networks and received by dozens of aggressive species who had been planning their own campaigns of conquest. The message was simple, but it changed everything about galactic politics. Earth's children had grown up and they were nothing like their parents had been. They did not fight wars to capture territory or resources. They fought to eliminate threats permanently and completely. Any species foolish enough to attack their homeworld would face the same fate as the Zephyrians. Total extinction was the price of threatening humanity. The galaxy learned why Earth had never been successfully conquered by anyone despite appearing primitive and defenseless. Humans had redefined what it meant to fight for survival, and in doing so had made themselves the most dangerous species in known space. They were no longer victims waiting to be rescued. They were predators who hunted other predators, and the hunt would continue until every enslaved world was free.